Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. So, this is a follow-up to the video I made this morning trying to help Rakesh out. We've spoken over Facebook Messenger with a phone call, and he sent me a problem album that we're going to work on together. This is cold. All I've done is taken a quick look at things. So that's the zip file, and I extracted it to a directory I created called The Promise. So let's open this up in MusicBrainz Picard to see what we can see. All right, so if you're new to MusicBrainz Picard, the first thing to do is cluster. I hit the cluster button. And now I can look at the album as a whole. So there's 11 different titles. The artist is set from Farrington+Mann, when in Rome in parentheses. The album is The Promise 30. And then there's 11 different track numbers, different lengths. The artist or the album date is 2020. Album artist Farrington+Mann, and the comment here. And we have embedded artwork, which is great. So what I'm looking for first is any inconsistencies. So let me just open up the zip file. Actually, I don't need the zip file. Let me look at the album artwork. Farrington+Mann is how it's listed here, and The Promise 30 is the album name. So I'm already starting off wrong because I just put The Promise instead of The Promise 30. My bad. This looks interesting to me. An artist named Farrington+Mann, just like the album artist, but now it says when in Rome. That looks a little suspicious, but besides that, it looks pretty good. So the first thing I want to do without making any adjustments besides this, The Promise 30, and then taking a look at Discog. So this is how the artist is listed, and there's only one album here called The Promise, but it's short. It's got 6 tracks, and we have 11 tracks here. But I'm not too worried about that. Really, all I want to worry about is that I name this correctly, and I don't know if the plus symbol is an illegal character or not. But let's just look for this again. So I clearly see The Promise 30 when I do a search, and it leads me back to just these 6 tracks. That doesn't mean there's not another release that has more. All it means is that other release isn't in this database. But still, I'm interested in the proper artist name. So let's pull this out of MusicBrainz Picard right now. Let's just do this. New folder. Let's see if that's a legal character. It is. So let me put this inside that folder structure. And I really didn't have to pull this out. Let me cluster again. And I'm just looking one more time. So I don't like this and instead of the plus. But we're not going to do anything about it now. We're going to see how this adds to my test Plex server. And before I do anything, let me create a brand new test Plex server pointing to the same media. So I'll go to my settings, and I'm in my test, one of my test Plex servers, not my main one. Go to libraries, add a library, music, and we'll call this, oh, my finger slipped, music-Rakesh. Next, we'll point to the same folder structure. And we'll check the advanced settings. So this is so Rakesh can check his advanced settings. I'm not going to change anything. Nothing is selected. besides what's selected by default. So I'll just slowly slide down through. And of course, I'm using everything just as it should be. Plex Music Scanner, Plex Music Agent, and we'll add the library. So Plex is doing its thing. It's scanning. By default, I'm on the recommended tab. I'll switch to library. And by default, it's showing the artist. And in the various artist folder is this compilation album on this server. Okay, so let's move this structure in. I'll cut it. And I'll paste it into the library structure. We'll go back to Plex, and are we already scanning? We're scanning it already. Well, actually, it's still scanning from my initial scan, but now it's finding that album, and it says it's updating metadata. All right, there's no picture, but if we click into it, that album did add. Just by putting it into the proper folder structure. So I think Rakesh may just be missing that, and that's an easy fix. Now this is basically an unmatched album. There's no description for the album. If we click to the artist, there's no description. So before we go too far, let's see what we can do about this. Let me go back to Discogs. Well, there's really nothing listed here that I could copy and paste in. But that doesn't mean there might not be something else on the web that describes this album. So I could simply do this. Right-click and copy. And I can go in and edit this. And down here under the review section, paste that in. And now it looks like any other matched album. Unfortunately, unless this is included in the database Plex scrapes, and extra information is in that database, you're not going to be able to do much more than this manual adjustment. And you see how it's marked as matched. I have many albums in my library that aren't matched because there's no metadata to match it to. But that doesn't mean those don't belong in my collection. So if I happen to have, let's see, I used the Beatles in the previous video. If I had all the officially released Beatle albums that were all listed at some place like Discog or Discogs.com, and Plex could match all those, and then I had maybe 4 or 5 bootleg Beatle albums, things that were never officially released. As long as it has enough matching metadata across key points, they would be added under the same artist and would be linked in with those same official albums. Okay, so let's do another test of this to see if we can recreate what might be going on with Rakesh. So let's go back to this. Let's pull this out. And then this library is scanning automatically. It's gone, but to make sure there's no remnants of it, I am going to do the Plex dance. I'll scan the library again. I'll go to manage and empty trash. Then I'll go into the settings to troubleshooting, and I'll clean the bundles. Now this takes a while on larger libraries. This small test server, it happens very quickly. So now that's gone. So now what happens if just the album was added without the artist? Well, actually, let's try this a couple different ways. Let's add it just without structure. Let's just add it as that album and see what Plex does. Well, it might be adding it, might not be. Okay, so this added differently. Well, no, it added the same way. Sorry, it didn't add differently. So we've got the artist and we have the album. And the artist now is Farrington+Mann, One in Rome. I'll have to watch my own video. It may have added differently. Let's do this one more time. All right, we'll wait for it to scan and go. So we'll just scan it again. Empty the trash and clean the bundles. So let's put the artist folder back in. Scanning automatically. There it is. Okay, so we have no cover art for the artist this time. So I was right, it was different. So when I added it without the artist structure, the artist used the same cover art as the album. But if Rakesh was doing that, he still would have seen something scan in. And because this artist is in the database, there's no poster to add, but you can add one manually. All right, and what other ways can I break this to try to recreate Rakesh's issue? Let's move it out again. And let's let Plex pick things up. Scan. Empty trash. Clean the bundles. All right, so let's change some advanced settings. Well, I'm going to take a guess that Rakesh did not change from Plex Music to Plex Music Scanner, or he changed any of these options. But seeing he'll be watching this video, he'll be able to let us know if he has. I'm going to click Prefer Local Metadata. And that's about the only thing that I can think to change. So let's add it back in. And we'll see what happens. Now, this is a pain in the rear end if you have a huge music collection because it takes a while to rescan the library when you're adding media. All right, so we have the artist folder, we have the album. Yeah, so the local metadata checkbox really isn't making a difference. Okay, so let's check it this way. Let's see what happened in my existing default music library. And it scanned in perfectly fine there too. It's just not a matched album, and there's nothing to match to. Oh, look at that. There is When in Rome. I bite my tongue. Well, let's do it this way. Let's see what we can see because we don't have a perfect match. So we have 11 tracks. With the 11th track being the Promise main instrumental. Yeah, so nothing really matches up with this version of the album. So that's interesting. But it looks like the artist is When in Rome. So I don't give up a good fight. Let's go back and just see what we can find for When in Rome. There's an artist, When in Rome. "45 versions. Let's see what we can see here. All right, I want to bring Music Brains Picard back in this. And let's search for When in Rome. All right, so we're interested in an artist named When in Rome. And I have 11 tracks. Let's see what this looks like. Well, this is not matching up at all. So this is not what we're looking for. Hmm. Now I'm sorting by track number. Let's get rid of When in Rome. So that's not a match either. Let's search by the Promise 30. And with 11 tracks, we don't have a match besides this, and I'm sure that's not correct. And we have nothing by Farrington and Mann. Let's just take a look at this just for the heck of it. Yeah, so that's not a good match. Okay, Rakesh, it's really up to you to try to see what might be different with your Plex server setup. So let's just cover some bases so we're all on the same page. Let's see, under general, I'm running version 1.41.3.9314. It's the latest update. I'm sure you probably are also. Something else that could interfere with things, but not likely. When you go to library under settings, you do have a warning about scanning your library automatically if you include music libraries and automatic updates under a Linux OS. This is basically the IO notify issue. Most Linux installs, or at least on my Synology NAS where this test server is running, it can only watch, I think, 8,100 folders for changes to the file system. And if you have more than that number of folders, Plex goes haywires. It'll scan, it'll stop in the middle of the scan, maybe it'll scan and then intro and end credit detection will stop, sonic analysis probably will hang, those sort of things. So I don't know if I asked you what you're running your server under. You did say you were working with Windows, but then you mentioned a NAS. So if you happen to be running a Synology or a QNAP or an Unraid NAS, that's all a Linux operating system. And if your music collection is huge, turn this setting off. Include music libraries and automatic updates and scan manually, or go to a scan time. Like, I could turn these off and just have everything scan every 2 hours. That's what I do on my Unraid NUC. It's an 11th gen Intel branded NUC with a mobile version of a i5 processor in it that's disconnected from all my media on my Synology NAS. That disconnection won't allow it to check for changes to the file system. But my library is so big that when I ran Plex on the Synology NAS, I had to set it up this way with a time scan. Otherwise, things went haywire. And again, that's the IO notify issue. So if I just do that and come back, none of those changes were saved. So this might be another troubleshooting step. Besides that, Rakesh, OBS Studio is pretty easy to use. You can do your own screen recordings in that under Windows to show me what's going on, but it's kind of up to you to watch my video to see what might be different on your end. But with basically no change to it, it scanned in okay, but by putting it into the proper artist structure, as I found listed at Discogs, it scanned in better, but that meant I had to go find an artist photo myself if I wanted one, and because it's an unlisted album, I have to supply my own extra metadata. So this is getting long, but it's very interesting. It's a very interesting issue, and I can't wait to see if you're able to scan it in like I was able to, or to discover why you're not able to scan it in. So everybody else, stay tuned, because whatever I find out, I will probably make a short video explaining what happened on Rakesh's end. Thanks for watching.